Hello to everybody. So thanks for joining us. I think we can start. Yesterday, Tim announced a new project which is called Civil Infrastructure Platform. And today we, Yoshi from Toshiba and myself, would like to give you some background on this. So about the project scope, about the setup, so how is the whole thing organized, and most important, the roadmap, what are the things addressed and what will be done in the next month and years. So initially, I would like to explain a little bit what kind of systems we address. So what is a civil infrastructure systems in our sense? So it's basically systems which supervise and control the infrastructure around us. So, and these systems have the characteristics that they are best if they are not noticed at all. So they have just to work, they have to be there. And examples you can see on the picture. For example, controlling trains, railway infrastructure like interlocking switches and so on. You have traffic control, traffic lights, the whole traffic management of a city. You have healthcare devices, all the devices you find in a hospital or the doctor, from small to big devices. Energy distribution, power generation, up to water, wastewater, and all these technologies. And these are the systems companies like ours, like Toshiba, Hitachi, Siemens, are providing products in. And that is the core focus of this initiative, to really provide platforms for this. To understand this a little bit better, I would like to characterize a little bit how these systems look like. So they have some special features, requirements, and in this box it's summarized a little bit. I've called this industrial greatness, so which is reliability. I talked about this. These systems have to be there, and we expect that they are just working all the time. Some of the systems have functional safety requirements. This is for systems who could harm people if they don't work correctly. So maybe some of you were in the talk of Darren yesterday regarding functional safety, where he explained what the thinking in this area is and what has to be done to make systems functional safe. So imagine if you control railway switches for high-speed trains, you have a big problem if two trains crashes because some of the systems does not work in the right way. Security was and is important, increasingly important still. We don't want that somebody changes the behavior of our system or modifies the system in some way. And typically also for those systems that typically we also have real-time requirements. That means it's not only important to provide the right outputs, to provide the right directions, but also to provide them in time. And what is very special, so if you look at other systems, you have at home, so the average lifetime of a smartphone, for example, is like 2 years, something like this. And in those systems we address here, we are talking about decades. So these systems are operational for a very long time. And this has impact on how we build the systems to make them long-term maintainable at the end. All of these things lead to very conservative update strategy. So we do not want to update them. So sometimes the reason is that it's really hard to physically access the systems. The other thing is, that we do not want to have any risk in getting any regression in. So if these systems are updated because of security reasons, only the little parts who are affected are fixed in order really to reduce the risk. Never change what is already running, never change what is already certified, and you do not want to do the whole test effort again. And this is especially true for systems where you do safety certifications, because this is very time-consuming, costly, and very formal. And this is the situation today. So on the other hand, we have basically also in these systems, the same business needs as everybody. So it's all about costs, it's about speed. Costs in terms of developing these products, but also setting up, installing these products, and then maintaining these products over the lifetime. And recall it, we are talking about 10 to 60 years here, so the maintenance costs are really crucial. But what we see today, what we can observe today in all of these systems, they are changing. So in the past, they were highly proprietary, so they were really built from ground up using totally proprietary components. For example, homegrown operating systems, which were maintained over years. Almost everything was done on our own in our companies. And these systems used to be very closed, technically closed. And there we see, also due to the increase of the software we have in the system, it's not possible and it does not make sense to do everything on our own here. So there's a certain line of commoditization. So for example, it does not make sense to really develop own operating systems anymore. Nobody is buying a Toshiba product or a Siemens product because there's a special proprietary operating system in it. So the opposite is the case. And so we see a lot of things which become commodity or are close before coming commodity. And these are mostly also taken as open source components and integrated in the systems. And the second thing is that systems start slowly to get more and more open. And there are some use cases behind that, mostly driven, for example, from data analytics, which is a big hype. So everybody's talking about big data and optimizations there. So, and what people do now is they basically collect data on devices, push them to the cloud, do some analytics, and try to learn and optimize things, or to get information out to do predictive maintenance, for example. This is the first step of analytics, pushing everything to the cloud. The second step is now doing certain tasks directly on the device, to be independent from the cloud connection and to have shorter reaction times and so on. And we expect that now we do a little regarding this on the devices, and this will change, this will increase. And we will, over the years, put more and other analytics functionality into the devices. So we have the need to have the devices extendable and to update them in the field and to put additional functionality in. So on the other hand, we have a shift from standalone systems on the one side, which are quite comfortable if you look at security today, but they also have a lot of, mean a lot of effort in terms of maintenance and commissioning. You always need physical access to the devices. Also, if you just only reconfigure them, if you change parameters and so on, you have to get to the device, you have to do it, you have to do updates on the device, and systems get more and more connected. This is not new, we know this from IoT and so on, but this more and more goes into these industrial domains. And on top of this, the devices start talking to each other also. So we have connected devices. And so if you look at the left side, we have systems which are from the architecture closer to things we know and closer to the architectures of consumer systems and of IoT. Let's call it IoT systems we know from home automation and other domains. So platforms for this are today mainly driven by enterprise IT, consumer domains, and that's why we said it's time to really join forces of the old industry to establish a platform which is sustainable, which is long-term maintainable, and which fulfills all our requirements I mentioned on the last slide. Also to bring into the community more the requirements we have regarding reliability, security, and so on, to align and to increase the upstream work. And last but not least, also to share cost. So it does not make sense that every company is doing this base technology on their own. And it's even worse in big companies like ours. We even do it today for different products. So the goal is really to establish a standard platform here up to a certain degree. And all the new features coming in from IoT influences shall be provided as well in a, let's call it, industrial hardened form and added to this software stack. So to set this in context, others did this already. So if you look at automotive-grade Linux, for example, this is exactly the way to go. They already established a platform like this for the automotive use cases. And there are more. This is far from being complete. This should show the idea. We have a lot going on in the, let's call it, communication niche area of IoT. We have a lot of industrial consortia which also care a lot about communication and a little bit more. But really the base platform, like an operating system plus some libraries, plus some tools for these infrastructure devices which are sustainable, long-term maintainable, and fulfill our real-time safety requirements was not there. And this is the gap we want to fill with a civil infrastructure platform. So looking at the scope technically, this is very high level. Yoshi will go into some more details later on. We focus on the left side, you see the device, the software stack on the device, which is around, of course, the Linux kernel, added by real-time, added by safety support, for example, by virtualization. Then we have some common libraries on top, which everybody needs. And this then, step by step, will be extended by domain-specific libraries and additional features on top. Very important for this is, in parallel to this, have a harmonized toolchain, which is maintained in parallel to this. This, of course, starts with the build environment and the test automation to really ensure that, that we have a good test coverage, ensuring that this base layer fulfills the specification. But the focus of this initiative is not really on writing specifications. So the focus is really on building the software stack and this tool stack. But we also have some assets we need and we have to create, and which will partially addressed also in this initiative. And this is on the on the right side, the concepts part. We might have to add additional documents, for example, based on existing activities like SIL2 Linux MP and others, which then complete the full package, which then can be used directly for product development in the mentioned areas. So the target systems we address is basically everything where Linux runs on, or where it makes sense to run Linux on. So it basically starts from Raspberry Pi class devices. If you compare it to computational power and memory, and goes up to PC-like, even server hardware, which is built into bigger devices like, I talked about interlockings, controlling railway switches, or in healthcare, it could be MRT scanners, which are controlled by big computers today already. So we start with a single platform, which is at the very, very first step a PC, but this will be extended step by step then by additional reference platforms. which are defined by the companies who are contributing to that. So this is similar to other projects. So this is how it works in automotive-grade Linux, for example, as well. So how does this whole thing work, and how did we set this up? So this pretty much shows a general blueprint of many of these initiatives basically work. So you have a set of member companies which provide two things. Initially, some people who really work on that topic, who contribute. This is the blue lines. And secondly, which helps a lot, these companies pay a club fee, a membership fee, which results in a budget, which allows us to finance certain activities. So for example, to fund maintainers for certain topics and packages, which can be full-time or part-time, which enhances the activities and really decouples some activities of the single companies. So what will be done? We will not start from the scratch. We of course, use what is there. We build on top of existing projects. We contribute to existing projects. And the initial focus is really, and Yoshi will elaborate on this further, on ensuring a long-term support which is needed in this area for the initial software stack, which will be the first version of the platform at the end. So with this, I will hand over to Yoshi.
Yeah. As Urs mentioned, our civil infrastructure systems usually need more than 10 years support. It's up to 6 years support sometimes. So this is quite important aspect for us. That's why we initially focused to long-term systems and long-term support. Oh, can I have to say so? Yeah, but to enjoy the long-term support maintenance, we also have strict rules, and this is our upstream first policy. Because when we create something, just on our maintained kernel, this makes a big fragmentations, and we know we will face a serious issue in quite near future if upstream kernel support on the similar functionality on it. So that's why we would like to have upstream first policy on it. So our upstream first policy is not only maintenance and maintained features, but also security fixes. If the upstream has a security fix on it, we will try to backport. But this backport effort also will be face big issues. For example, maybe first 2 years is maybe okay, but after that, upstream kernel changes a lot. So even new security fixes are available on the new kernel, we have to consider how to backport to our old maintained kernel. But anyway, if we have an upstream policy, we can follow the upstream and what kind of changes are made. So it might be easier to backport for that kind of security fixes. And this slide shows our motivation, why we need long-term support. So currently, upstream kernel releases every 2 or 3 months. I think it's approximately 70 days for each. And each kernel version have a lot of changes. But most of industry companies may be using LTS kernel or LTSI kernels, which supports 2 to 5 years support. When you look at kernel.org, you can find some LTS kernels. And usually it is 2-year support, but some kernel already have 5-year support. But what we need is more than 10-year supports. So 5 years is not enough. And the other our requirement is embedded related functionalities. So LTSI kernel have this ability to extend LTS kernel to support new functionality on it. It's also allowed to backport before releasing. But LTSI kernel still have only a few years support. So when we use this kind of kernel for each product, we also backport some SOC features from the upstream or vendor kernels. So that means each product have different types of backport stuffs. But most of part is quite common. So currently, we need to support a lot of kernels, even just one company. This is why we would like to have a common super long-term support kernels. And this slide shows what we will be done. CIP kernel will be support more than 10 years. Yes. I can say maybe 15 years or something. But if we just limited to backport some features, for example, one year, it's much difficult to use after that. So at first, we may create a very long merge window that we can merge some new features from upstream. And after this merge window, for example, 5 years later, we will close this merge windows. Then we will change to the security fix maintenance mode. So that security fix maintenance mode will be extended to the 10 to 15 years or something. But we also need to have one next versions before we move to the security fix. Otherwise, we are difficult to move from the one kernel to the other kernel, and also, we are difficult to backport the new features from to old kernels. So that's why we would like to have some overlapped merge windows, something. But currently, this is not concreted idea. We just said approximately every 3 years, but not decided yet. So we have to estimate how long is good for us or not. And to provide a super long-term support, we categorize packages in these 3 layers. And the first one is, of course, Linux kernel itself. And we need to, we will support this specific version of kernels for more than 10 years. And it includes CIP required features in near future. And on top of that, we also define the CIP core packages. This core packages is very common packages that we can share and we can use frequently. And this is a typical packages, and we will define that later. But to develop this kind of core package and kernels, we also need some development packages. But this kind of development package includes, for example, debuggers or some library utilities to compile the packages. That kind of things not installed on the device, but we need it for reproducibility to make a reproducibility. So that's why we have this category on it. And here it's just a very simple example. Core package includes only, I think, 7 packages, but this is very commonly used for our case. And this kind of stuff need to have a super long-term support. But this is just example. We still are not concretely decided, so we will decide in the near future and which component must have super long-term support. And the other stuff is development packages. We have a lot of development packages in it, but this kind of package is just maintained to reproducible builds. Okay, and this slide shows our development plan. As you can see the previous slide, we may start from very small set of packages to establish our super long-term support structures. So this one includes super long-term support kernel and core packages, and also some the development packages. But this is the reason why we start small is we would like to establish this kind of small set as soon as possible. Because if this kind of layer need to take, for example, 4-year development term, it not makes sense. The technology improvement is quite fast. For example, now we have some many IoT stuffs, and we will have quite a lot of IoT stuffs on other machine-to-machine connection or something like that to make our life better. So we can't wait. So that's why we start very small part. And after that, when we establish the core packages, we try to extend it one by one. And that kind of extension will have some new features in kernel, and not only just kernel, but also we'd like to have some standard libraries, so such as support, for example, industrial networking protocol or something like that. So this kind of stuff may be needed in the civil infrastructure systems, and what we will be extend for near the future. And this is milestones. Last year, we start discuss at, I think, we met ELC last year first. So at that time, we start discussing how to collaborate and what can we share the development effort. So we did many meetings and also conference calls to establish this project. And now it's 2016, and we success to launch a civil infrastructure platform at this event. So after that, we will move to establish a base layer. I hope this is maybe in this year or something like that. And then we will create new features on it. This is our current milestones. And we try to say, please join. We need a maintainer for super long-term support. And I think Linux kernel community and also embedded Linux communities have many developers who have this ability. So we hope we would like to talk whenever you want. So we need maintenance for this project. And please, and here is members you can meet at the ELC. So when you find this kind of members, please feel free ask me. For example, I'd like to become a maintainer, and how about that, or something like that. So this is what we want. And please join. Not only a maintenance, but also we welcome to join company members. And I'd like to summarize these presentations. And we just started civil infrastructure platform projects. So to overcome many issues that we commonly have. And we will establish a base layer from the beginning, but which have a safety and reliability requirement. So we will focus at first super long-term support, but move to this kind of requirements to solve. Yeah, this is I think this is the last one. Yeah, and please, this is contact information. We will have mailing, our official mailing shortly, but currently we are now setting up that. So please feel free send us our email. And also, if you want to, when you want to check up website, you can find some information on it. This is just started, so currently not much information, but you can find a lot in the future, I hope. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So this is all of our presentations, and yeah, is there any questions? The question is, if the hardware have gone, some reasons, how to solve this kind of issue, even we have a super long-term support kernel. Is it right? Okay.
Yeah.
I know it's not your problem. I'm just saying you got to get hardware on it.
That's a good question.
What willst du?
So of course, this is an open issue to address, and we can't solve the problem on the hardware side. And possibly the kernel won't be maintained for 50 years, already for that reason. But still, there is hardware, industrial hardware, which lasts 10 years and longer, which is available for that phase. And for that phase, you need to cover the support topic. And this is what we are targeting at, not the 50 years old kernel.
So you're freezing, it sounds like you're going to freeze for those whatever 7 or however many core components you had. You're going to freeze the versions of those. So don't you need a maintainer for like each one of them? You need to be watching the security fixes for OpenSSH and the security fixes for the kernel and security fixes for BusyBox, but we kind of hope that BusyBox is done, right? That it doesn't get a lot of new features. But anyway, so you need a lot of maintainers, right? Or you need a maintainer who can cover all those different areas.
At least we have to take care that it's done. So sometimes it will be done by the maintainers of the packages, sometimes not, because maybe the support is already over for that component, and then we have to do it on our own. So of course the goal is to initially, if the component is still under support, to get it, let's say, so the official way into that component, and then get it back from mainline.
Are there different constraints on the user space components than there are for the kernel? Does the kernel have to last longer? Or are they all pretty much the same? If you have to do an inbuild upgrade, it's all the same.
So the question was if there are different constraints regarding if it's a kernel component or a user space component. Up to now, we handle everything the same. It depends really how far the stack will go at the end. So there might be some components which will be handled differently, just in order to manage this at the end. but this we will see. It's open yet.
One of the reasons to have a 2.5 or 3 or whatever many years of compatibility is because being backwards compatible for 5, 10, or 15 years is going to prevent you from doing things. Sometimes you need to kind of put a line and then know that you're only supporting certain things up to some point to get new features, or sometimes fix new features. And in your list of packages, there were things like OpenSSL, which in the last couple of years have gone through things that are not going to be compatible with things before that. How are you going to create an infrastructure or a platform, a set of tools that is based off projects that are going to give you 2, 3, 4 years of compatibility, but then make those ports to support them 15 years in the past? I know it's a bit of a convoluted question, but if you're going to be based off of something that is going to be moving at a certain rate, and then you're going to be backporting things beyond the backwards compatibility breakage line, I don't know how's that going to work.
So I'm not sure if I got the question. So the question was how we do this. So the fact is we already do it. Do we just do it in, as I said, in several companies and for several products in parallel, and we want to bring these efforts together at the end. So it works, so there is no technical hurdle to do this, or what is your concern?
Well, if I can answer. Okay, I think the issue is like for something a network protocol like OpenSSL, as things advance in the security industry, right, the protocols actually change. But in the case of civil infrastructure systems, I think you're talking about having to preserve both ends, right? So if you've got a system that's talking to the traffic lights in your city, right, then you're not going to be changing the control system from what's in the traffic lights. You just have to live with that, and if some horrific bug comes up in OpenSSL, you got to figure out how to fix it on both sides, but still with the old software, right? So you're not going to be introducing new security protocols in the control side that just plain don't exist in the traffic lights. So
exactly.
You're going to have in this group expertise about all the core components that are on the super long-term support, right? Because if you want to backport a fix on OpenSSL 5 versions to the past, you're going to have to bring some kind of expertise about that component to the group, right?
Yes.
That's going to be tough.
Yeah, so I guess like one thing would be like, you know, think a few years back when maybe the most advanced cipher in OpenSSL maybe was, you know, DES, and think about, you know, what would happen if, say, you know, still 20 years from now, the best cipher you had in your OpenSSL implementation was DES. You know, it's going to be completely, you know, it's already completely broken, and the longer you go, it's just going to be even more completely broken. So it almost seems that at some point, you have to switch up to a newer version of OpenSSL and recertify everything in order for you to have any sort of, you know, security whatsoever. I mean, if the cipher doesn't even exist in the version that you're currently using, you know, at some point it's going to have to upgrade, I think, unless you're just okay with it not being secure.
That's a bit like the update you have to do with the hardware for one existing.
Yeah.
External configuration you have to address. Right. So if the implementation of the security protocol or the security cipher is no longer appropriate, then it's broken, it's a bug, and you have to fix it. And if the fix is actually an upgrade, okay. Yeah. But for the systems where this doesn't matter, or where it's not part of the critical communication, then you keep it. Yeah. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution for these kind of problems.
When you apply security issues or security patches on functionalities, at some point developers make a decision, which is if we want to be able to write this software and continue maintaining this software, we cannot do that anymore if we keep maintaining certain things that maybe don't apply anymore, right? Otherwise, it's impossible to maintain, to do your job, right? Otherwise, all the software will be compatible for the last 50 years. So I guess my question was more, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be compromises. So where do you guys think those compromises are going to be? Is it that we're not going to be able to be up to date with not only the very latest, but maybe not only the latest, because we want to rather be compatible or be able to backport these functionalities?
This domain compatibility is the highest value, as long as no other constraints are broken, like security or safety or whatever. So you remain compatible, and that's why you keep the old versions around. So at this point, actually, you decouple from the main line. You decouple from the development which goes on and which adds new feature or replaces feature because better solutions are available. And this gap, basically, we want to fill. With which resources is something to address. So ideally, with the people who are already involved in the projects and who know very well what was done in the past and how it should be done, how it should be fixed. So the solution is not to have now completely new experts being created and doing this stuff, but ideally involve the communities and involve the people who worked on this in the past and who are still working on this to have the expertise at hand. That's the idea behind it. It is definitely, but it has to be solved because otherwise the alternative is that the devices are unfixed in the field. They won't be replaced after 10 years. Just because you found a nice bug in some subsystem, wherever. And that's the situation we have right now, that the devices are in the field de facto unfixed.
And if you really need a functionality and you bring something in, this is also an option. This is not forbidden. This does not mean if we release a version that you stick for each and every package with the same version over the lifetime, but you have a consistent stack of a long-term maintained based system. And yeah.
As the security ciphers get more and more complicated in the future, won't that force updates of the physical systems to maintain the computing power to even decrypt?
The future will show, but
that could make.
You shouldn't focus so much on security because security is one part of the problem, but it's not the main problem you're facing. Because if you're building a system that's supposed to last if you're building a system that's supposed to last for 20, 30 years, then it's a bad idea anyway to rely on a specific means of like doing all the security things. So security is important, but the more important thing is to really keep the systems up and running and design the systems so that you don't need to exchange your security ciphers and mechanisms. And make options for, or make other options available that when something breaks, basically you need to foresee that, but that's the hard part about building such systems that last so long.
This is more of a human resources question. I mean, you pointed out you need lots of maintainers, but you've also said you're going to want to keep that expertise for a long period of time. 60 years.
Yeah.
So how practical is it, given that your average software engineer is like moving around every couple of years? You know, so how do you solve that problem?
Actually, don't get this wrong. We are not maintaining one version for 60 years. So
I appreciate it.
So there are some experiences in the area of LTS and LTSI. So it definitely is a challenge, but of course there will be a handover. And we also in our companies have some experience also doing this. So we both run a Linux team providing Linux for different product divisions and business units. And we think we know what we do in this area. It's definitely a challenge to always find the right persons, and this was also a challenge for LTS and LTSI, who are willing to really maintain the stack, or at least the kernel, for 2-3 years. And then you have to overlap and phase in new people over the time.
So I'll make a comment based on a presentation that I saw online from one of the long-term maintainers. So there's one of the long-term maintainers who maintains a kernel that's over 5 years old. The amount of work actually kind of reduces over time. He's actually maintaining a 5-year-old kernel, and his work goes down. You could argue whether or not it's because the security patches just don't apply, right? So there's a certain amount of traffic that goes on into the Linux kernel to patch things, but more and more it's patching things that don't exist in your kernel, and so there's a certain, so you can also argue the counterpoint, which is also less people are paying attention to it, so there's not as much flow on certain areas, but to some degree, so for him it's a part-time job, so it is doable, I think, but it's going to be job security for someone.
Yeah, another comment on that. You mentioned we need very many people, and it's an HR problem, but there's also another aspect to it, because it's not yet fully leveraged that you can automate many aspects of this maintenance questions. There's been a nice talk yesterday by some guy from Renesas about evaluating which fixes should go into long-term kernels, which should not, and we are actually actively working on increasing the amount of automation in this area, so to not rely on a single guy maintaining a stack for 60 years.
Okay, so I think we're at the end for now. So we are around, so if you want to discuss further or have additional questions, just talk to us. Jan, Wolfgang, Yoshi, myself, and all the people on the slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.